So you're thinking about running, but not sure how to take the first step. My name's Brian Patterson, and I'm here to help. And welcome to Brian's Run Pod. Well, welcome back to Brian's Run Pod. And thank you very much to listening to the second part of my interview with Colleen McKenna. In part two of my interview, I started off by asking her if feeling comfortable with her running comes naturally to her. Do you... I always sometimes look for, when I'm going for a run, I'm kind of, maybe this is the promised land. I'll going from a run, but I'm not struggling and I'm enjoying it and whatever. Does money come naturally to you? I mean, is this something that when you go for your run after 5 minutes, you're really enjoying it and you enjoy the feeling of running and you enjoy that, you're outside, you're taking in the surroundings and you're enjoying that you're working hard and that kind of thing. I suppose what I'm trying to say is that for me, sometimes it can be a struggle, but I have to complete it. You know, I said I'll do 5K or whatever. Is that something that comes naturally to you or not?
So interestingly, as I said, I almost always have a distance set out in my like a minimum distance. If I'm going out the door, I know I kind of, and I've got little routes all around that I know roughly how long to take. Okay. So usually I have a distance, and I try not to come home in less than that distance. Right. But sometimes I think, this is going really well. I can extend it with this little leap here or there. Mm-hmm. And I really like to get to that. So usually the first mile feels rubbish, no matter what kind of shape I'm in, and how much.
First 20 yards is terrible.
It's awful, and so I kind of consign myself to thinking the first mile is a warm up. But I really like to get to that place where it feels good, and you're looking around, you're thinking, I like this. There's a really nice poem by a guy called Tony Harrison called A Kumquat for John Keats, but he's got a line in it that is, "This is how a good life ought to feel." And so I sometimes have that in my head when I'm thinking, okay, this is it, this is good. And it might be in Bushy Park, it's usually somewhere not on a busy road, where you're feeling comfortable, nice pace, but not really gasping like I usually am at parkrun, and just kind of enjoying the moment. And I guess that's one of the things I really like about running, is it's one of those times in my life where I really think this is a good moment here and now. I'm enjoying what I'm doing. And I maybe sometimes get that on my bike, but I really can sometimes get that, not always, but in running. And I know that's been a good run. And usually it's got to be decent enough weather. I don't feel like that in the pouring rain or when I'm absolutely frozen.
Is it sort of kind of...
But everything kind of comes together.
Yeah. Sort of thing, it's sort of all... Yes, and like you said, it sometimes it does depend on you can go on a route, and then you're running at a good pace. You can even take a phone. You can even if you want to take a telephone conversation or whatever, and it's and it feels good. But every now and again, it's just like, if I can get that feeling again.
And a strange thing, I think when I was like a younger runner, it was always about running fast and running good times. Yeah. And I think as an older runner, that it's great to have those moments. I mean, that it's really nice for that to be the kind of goal of running, rather than constantly thinking, I'm not going to be it's not as fast as I'd like to be, or something. If you kind of reorient yourself to what it is running can give you and how you can appreciate it. I think for me, it's those kind of moments of a little bit of clarity and just feeling positive. And, there are some bits, you might be running downhill slightly or something, that feeling where it's a little bit less effort and you just can really enjoy running and your hair flying back or whatever. As, I don't know, as adults, where do we, it's almost like that freedom that you can have as a child. It's almost like, I think there are very few other elements in my life where I get that kind of absolute freedom again that you got as a kid just running around. And I feel like that's one of the, and I think that's like, apart from all the other sports I've tried or done, it's running that kind of gives that to me. And I think that's one of the reasons I want to kind of hold on to running as long as I possibly can in my life, because it's just such a, I don't know, it's such a kind of special moment that you sometimes get. And I'm trying, like you said, I don't want to paint too rosy a picture of my running, because quite a lot of it's a bit of a slog, and I'm working hard or out of breath or whatever, and thinking, oh God, another 3 miles. But you do get those lovely moments, and I think there's something really
special. Do you ever look
special
at other people and watch them run? Because I'm doing that increasingly now, even doing this podcast, is that I look at other people and watch them run, and I'm thinking, oh, I wish I could run like that.
I'll tell you when I do that. When I volunteer at Parkrun, that's the only time I see the front runners, and some of them are just flying, and they're elegant and long stride, and
their tempo
and rhythm all looks so good. Yeah, so you do see that. Or if you go out in one of the nice things about running in Bushy is there's some really top-notch runners who run there. I mean, Becky Briggs, for example, I often see her out running there, and she was the
used to get the Kenyans.
That's right.
Strawberry Hill.
That's right. See them, and you see some really top-notch people out training there, and that's a nice place to. You just look at the form and you think that's incredible. The form and the speed are really impressive.
Yeah. It's like watching ballet, or it's effortless. The way they do it. It's. And it's something, you think, something to strive for. It's nice to have inspiration. That's one way of putting it. Do you? So, what do you listen to music, or are you an audio book type of person?
I like sort of podcasts about running, but I actually don't listen to them while I'm running. I always listen to podcasts while I'm running. Always listen to music, and I find that it's funny because I actually naturally just run a little bit faster when I'm listening to music. It's without even really trying. So I've got just a list on a playlist on my phone that's only for when I'm out running.
Do you ever think that running without music, do you ever think, I haven't tried that for years, but do you think without having that distraction, if you call it distraction, do you think it might help you?
Well, I think it does something different. So I do run without music at least once a week. And it definitely makes me more aware of my surroundings, and in a way that maybe I can be a bit more appreciative of where I'm running. Because I think the thing with music is it almost blocks everything out, so that I'm really just so focused and in a kind of zone. Whereas without that, it means I'm much more, I guess, present in the area I'm running. And so I find a run is more enjoyable with music, so that's probably why I usually play music. But I do run at least usually once a week without music, and it just kind of keeps me a little bit more. It's hard to explain. It's I feel like I'm just engaging with the sport a little bit differently. Yeah.
Okay, I mean, and do you listen to sort of quite up-tempo music, or is it you do?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's quite an eclectic mix, but the main thing is it all has a pretty fast beat, or is quite, or has a kind of, I don't know, kind of rousing chorus, that kind of thing that kind of kind of gives you the extra bit of spark to keep the pace going.
Oh, right. Yeah. Oh, that's good. Are you doing any? You've got a target coming up? Have you got any runs that you're long runs that you're going to be aiming for, or events?
Well, the events I've got, I'm doing the Turk's Head 10K in a couple of weeks, and then I've got the longer term event is I'm doing the Cabbage Patch 10 miler in October. I try to do that most years if I can. Yeah. And then I'm doing, have you ever done any of the Richmond Run Fest runs? So they usually do 5K, 10K, half marathon and marathon in a weekend in September.
Yeah, I remember. Is that the one that starts in Kingston? No?
One of the longer runs, or maybe both the longer runs go through Kingston, but the 10K and I think the half marathon both start in Kew Gardens.
Right.
And so I've got... Doing the 10K for that, and I'm dithering whether to do the half marathon the next day. So I don't know if I'll do both of those. But anyway, so the short answer is I've got a handful of 10Ks and 10 miler coming up, and I'll probably try and put in a half marathon for maybe November-ish, but maybe the one in Kingston, because I've done that a few times.
Because I did that, I think, a long time ago. I think when Anna was in a pushchair.
Oh, right.
And it was the year of the foot and mouth.
Oh, gosh.
So we started off in Kingston, but we couldn't, and we went down towards Esher, but we couldn't go a certain route because of the foot and mouth and whatever. So I always remember that.
Wow. So, but I think we're sort of spoiled for nice runs in this area. A lot of nice ones in Kingston and Ditton and so on. Not to mention all the big London ones. I did the Vitality half marathon a couple of years ago in London, and really enjoyed that.
Right,
that was a nice run.
So, do you go running when you're on holiday?
I do. I think it's a really nice.
What's the best place?
Oh gosh. Question.
I think you said you went running in the US, is that?
Yeah. So I've run a fair bit in the US. Trying to think where I've run recently on holiday. I suppose I ran in Florida, which was really hot, but fun. Really warm. I usually just do kind of a short run if I'm in like a city, if I can, even just a couple of miles, just to kind of get my bearings. Around. I
mean, that's the thing now, is that you can look online or on Strava and you can see the local routes.
Yeah, and just kind of get a quick flavour of a place, because I think the nice about running is you can cover a fair bit of ground in a fairly short period of time. So that's what I usually do. So I'm struggling to come up with some good examples, but that's all.
I always think that if you do run if you're going away, then it doesn't seem as hard because it's new. Everything's quite new, and which is quite nice.
Yeah.
Although it depends on where you are. If they're kind of hilly,
we're quite. Yeah. There is that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, is there anything else you'd like to cover? You'd like to tell us about?
Well, just that I think I mentioned to you that I recently read Richard Asquith's book called Race Against Time.
You're right.
And I loved that book. And so that's really influenced. I read that about, I don't know when it came out, about a few months ago, I think it came out. Or maybe I don't know if it's been out that long, because I was reading some reviews about it. But
because is that about, because I just started listening to it and on your recommendation. So it started off it was about trail running, is that right?
Well, he starts out with his own experience of trail running, but really it's about, he's looking at runners who are mainly 70 plus, between 70 and 105, and just looking at really exploring masters running, especially, and looking at firstly what's possible. So there are a lot of individual stories of these incredible runners. I would say most of the people in this book are over 80, and what they're doing and how they're training and why they're doing it, but also just the amazing. But then that's kind of interspersed with some really interesting evidence for the impact of running on longevity and quality of life as people age. And it's so compelling that you think, oh my goodness, why would anybody stop running? You just want to keep running because the benefits are enormous.
The bone density, obviously, the aerobic.
Yeah, but equally the individual stories are so inspirational too. And you think, often you think, as I said, I think I said earlier that when I was, starting out running, you'd go to runs and there'd be very few people over a certain age. It wasn't, and now things are really changing. Yeah. But there's this idea that if you're kind of in middle age, late middle age, there's still this whole opportunity to continue to run and pursue running and get incredible enjoyment and benefits open to you that maybe, I don't know, 10 years ago I wouldn't have thought really possible. So he looks at all kinds of different countries and kind of varieties of running from 100 meters to ultra marathons. And I think the lens he keeps coming back to is the kind of masters running. So in the book, part of it's about his own story of being in his early 60s and feeling his running was just kind of no longer so much fun, and he was getting injured and he wasn't as fast as he used to be, and it starts out kind of from he was in a fairly negative mindset, and then through this exploration he actually represents Great Britain in a masters, I think 10,000 meters. So he talks about the kind of training for that. So that's the kind of one of the narrative threads through it. Yeah. But in the meantime, he really just comes to reinvigorate his own running. And anyway, I found it a mix of really, I found it really quite inspirational, but also quite motivational. And one of the groups he talks with early on in the book are the octogenarian runners who meet, I think, annually at Bushy Park. So they've got they all get together, and so he's interviewed. There's masses of park runners who are over 80 who meet on an annual basis. I mean, they obviously run really regularly there, and he talks to them, and there's a chapter about it, and it's just fascinating to read. And he one of them says it makes more sense to focus on what you can do rather than to kind of moan about what you no longer can. And I think that kind of mind shift about running and about how for me personally, it's really been powerful. And so it's made
because it's not like you've got there's a certain age and then suddenly, well, I should be doing this. Doing the gardening.
Or just whatever. Because my times are going to decline naturally, it doesn't mean there's not still something I can really get from running. And also there's just the sense of camaraderie, and it sounded. It's I would really recommend it. I've really found it. And my father's still running. He's in his 80s now, and he ran a 10K last weekend. Wow. So this is I'm sending him a copy of this, saying, look, you're in the young side of things, and in terms of the subject of the book. So
I know, and it's something you just did touch upon, which I do see beginning to see a lot more of nowadays, is ultra running.
And
women and men sort of thing, and a lot more people are doing that now.
Absolutely.
Sophie, the
Rayworth.
newsreader.
Sophie Rayworth. She's amazing, isn't she?
Yeah, she is. Yeah. So and she does it, but it's not just. That's not just for the maniacs, but it's also you do get that people who will do that and take that on. So,
and also it looks. I would love to do something like that actually. And I noticed that there are some. I'm trying to remember the group who do it, but they set up runs around the country, and I think they vary from in the same weekend you could do between. I feel like it's 25k to 100k, and they set it up, but they look really interesting, and they're all like in the lakes or down in Dorset or wherever. And the other, because the podcast I really like is Running Commentary, Rob Deering and Paul Tonkinson, and I've been listening to that for a while, but they've quite got into some ultra running, and so they've had some really interesting podcasts where they they're talking about training for some of these runs, and then I don't know if you've listened to their podcast, but they record it while they run. So last summer they were doing Run to the Stones, and that was an amazing set of podcasts that they did where they're recording it as they're running it, and kind of hearing about how challenging some of those. And the other person I like on that is Vassos Alexander has written a couple of nice books about moving into ultra running. Because I think he's also a radio broadcaster, I think, in Virgin Radio, I think. Yeah, so I've enjoyed that. So I would, that's kind of maybe a longish term goal. I think I'd like to try. I love the idea of you run and you camp overnight and then you finish the next day. I think that would be really appealing to me. But to see. Yeah. Depends if I.
But no, yes, it's like because I mean, years ago it was like the marathon, like the 81, which was the marathon here, but now it's kind of moved into a different sphere.
It has,
So obviously with the park run and that kind of thing, but now if you really want to take up running, then there are, if you want to really extend your ambitions in running, then you can do things like ultra running and that kind of thing.
And again, I think with some of those, I know there's one that starts really locally. It feels like it starts in Richmond and goes to Brighton. I feel like it's in maybe even this time of year, May, June. Anyway, some people walk the whole thing. That's the other thing. If you see the images of the start, there are people who just walk it fast, or there's some people who run all 100k, and you think, well, there's something there then. If you feel you're fit enough, you could at least have a go, but you can also walk some of it and you wouldn't be on your own.
So I've noticed you've got a Garmin. It wouldn't be you wouldn't leave it anywhere. But I mean, so I know you listen to music, as you said, sort of thing. But is tech important to you, or
Yeah, it is. I've got a friend who lives on my road who runs, and he runs without anything, like he doesn't wear a watch or anything. And I was thinking to myself, would I even do that? And I think I would feel really... I think I should do it, but I don't think I would do it. So I think the answer to your question is it is, actually.
It's a bit of a crutch. Well, not quite a crutch, but
I like to know how far I've gone. I like to know how fast I'm going. I like to be able to upload my runs afterwards. And then I think, why? Why does it matter? But then I thought, well, it matters to me. So I think it is important. But I really admire my neighbour who just goes out and just runs. And I think, actually, that's probably the spirit of running, really. But so for me, I always have my Garmin on.
Okay.
Do you run with your?
Yeah, well, I use the Apple Watch, but that's because I'm a bit of a Mac nerd. So, when they did the last update for the Apple Watch last year, major update, they did put a lot of focus on running.
Right.
So there was a lot more features for runners, that kind of thing. So they used to, because I think the thing that I used to find very a bit frustrating with the Apple Watch is that you couldn't set your intervals or do anything like that, because I found, for me, and it's everyone's obviously different, is that for me to work hard, I do doing interval running, sort of that kind of. And then obviously there's year long ones and whatever. But I just found the only app that was doing it was Runkeeper, that was where you could set your own intervals, and that's part of the program. And I know a lot of people, kind of like, I kind of got the feeling like serious runners had the Garmin, and sort of like, so whereas having something like the Apple Watch, but then when they came up with this update, it kind of meant they kind of shone a light on people who do regularly run, because I know they want their focus is on health and fitness, so no, I like that, and also it means I can just run with my watch, put my headphones in, and I can listen to music podcasts or even take a call or whatever. I don't have to carry my phone with me or that kind of thing. I like that, and I think that's quite amazing that tech has come all this way. I mean, the days when I used to, I don't know if you remember, used to take my Walkman and...
Oh, yeah. Well, I didn't even bother. I just had this really old Casio watch that I think all it did was record when you started and when you stopped. It didn't tell you what pace you were going or anything else. And then, and it didn't upload it to anything. You just then went home and wrote down. I did 36 minutes running today. And you knew you had to think, and I think that was a 5 mile route, so that must have been, then work out the pace. But that's all it did.
I used to have an odometer on my bike, and I used to measure the distance. So I used to do that. And then I'd go for a run.
Exactly.
And I'd done it.
That's very old school.
Days before GPS.
That's right. I know.
For some of you young listeners, there wasn't. So But no, like you said, the technology has come leaps and bounds. Not just in terms of what we're wearing, but also the shoes as well, and the clothing that we wear. Having sweat dispersing clothes and that kind of thing.
Absolutely. And for me, actually, seeing when I first switched to Garmin, whenever it was a while ago now, a long time ago, but just being able to see how fast you were going, what the pace was, that was amazing to me.
I think they're very good at that.
In terms of helping me develop or understand, how fast I was going or wanted to go, or was it going too fast, whatever. That was quite incredible, just having that.
One last thing, do you do any kind of and something I'm really bad at, do you do any kind of like flexibility work or anything like that?
No, the funny thing is I do that, because that is something that I do a lot of stretching just normally, and that's because I learned to do that when I did gymnastics a long, long time ago. It's always kind of stayed with me, and that's always part of dance. Now, the funny thing is, it'd be interesting to know your thoughts on this, is I've read more and more, though, and I absolutely know this. So sometimes I do a dance class and then pick up and just either run home or do a run from there. And I'm always running more slowly. And I'm sure what I've been reading more recently is if your muscles are really stretched, they're actually not as fast immediately. So that you don't have quite the spring, because your muscles are actually quite... So that while stretching is really good overall in the long term, I don't now ever stretch right before I really want to do a decent run, or really minimal stretching. I warm up, like I walk and then gently run, but I don't do lots and lots of stretching anymore. I stretch when I finish a bit, but that's something I've found quite interesting, and I don't know.
I've heard from sort of personal trainers that you kind of want to be doing sort of dynamic exercises before you run. And then maybe afterwards, then you do the stretching. The stretching.
But I found if you've done a yoga class, something where you're really, really stretched out, that's when you try and run, I feel good, but I just can't get the pace. I feel quite slow. So, that's just a kind of...
Do you do, I think something we have, or we are about to cover or have covered on the podcast, is sort of plyometrics, sort of explosive type stuff?
No, I really enjoyed that episode, actually, and it really made me think I don't do a lot of that, and I probably should. So doing kind of like squats and things like that, right. I do, burpees, but not the but I haven't done the burpees or the jump up to a box, that kind of thing, for a long time, really. and definitely not as part of like as cross training or training to support running. And it made me think I really should do that, because I think that is somewhere because one of the things I've noticed is that I think I've always done this a bit, but probably more recently I've noticed that I don't really pick my feet up that high off the ground, and as a consequence, the injury I'm most likely to get these days is by tripping and falling. So I've got to. So and I know I need to pick up. So I think probably doing plyometrics and that sort of thing might help me lift a little bit higher. When I think
the main thing is to do cross training, like the strength work, there's flexibility and that kind of thing, and then it will kind of give you kind of become more balanced sort of thing. That sort of thing. Yeah. Well, we've done an hour.
Oh my gosh.
And that's amazing. Honestly, we could have talked for ages. But I just want to say a really, really big thank you for coming along, Colleen.
Oh, well, thank you. It's been a pleasure. And thanks for the podcast. I've learned a lot through the series. So appreciate it.
Thanks very much.
That's it for another episode, and looking forward to speaking to you next week with some beginner hints and tips about running. I just want to let you know that you can follow me on X, or what was known as Twitter, at Brian's Run Pod. I have just recently set up a Facebook page which is called Brian's Run Pod, and I am on Instagram at Brian's Run Pod. Also, my website is www.briansrunpod.co.uk, where you can get show notes, or on whatever podcasting app you are listening to the show. Plus, all my episodes have chapter markers if you need to get to different segments of the show. Plus, leave a review, as it will help others find this podcast. Music is Happy Day by Stock Audio, not forgetting artwork by Alice Patterson. Till next week, thanks again for listening.